So what do you think, Rabbi? Shall we get started or a couple more minutes? Excellent. Okay. So welcome everybody. It's really wonderful to have you here. I hope that technology doesn't fail us today and that we're able to have a really nice conversation and hear the amazing lecture that we're about to experience together. I'm really honored to be here representing the Jewish Agency for Israel in our newfound partnership with the wonderful Alliance of Rabbies. Baruch Hashem, your communities are growing and strengthening, and there is so much collaboration that we can do as a global Jewish organization together with your respective communities. So it's really wonderful to be here with you. Just to give you a little background for those of you who are less familiar with the work of the Jewish Agency, the Jewish Agency itself was founded in 1929 before there existed a state of Israel. Now, at the time, we had a much more kind of cohesive global Jewish community. We were a people that were very united without a state. Now, fast forward 90 plus years, we have a state and a thriving Jewish state, but our people are perhaps more dispersed in many different ways, whether it is matters of hashkafa or matters of, we won't get into politics here, but we're working very deeply within Jewish communities to try and bridge those gaps between global Jewish communities, connecting them with each other and with the state of Israel. The Jewish Agency operates today in some 65 countries around the world, hundreds of communities working together hand in hand with hundreds of global Jewish organizations, with the main goal of really the two pillars of the Jewish Agency. One being the strengthening the state of Israel and strengthening the global connections with the state of Israel. And two is building global Jewish communities' resilience, ensuring that Jewish education persists and ensuring that the resources within these communities exist for capacity building in the future. Now, all of this is within mind, of course, the strong sense of Kol Yisrael Arevim Ze Lazeh, that we are all Jewish people are responsible for one another. We really must be there for each other in times of crisis and in times of calm. And that's really what the Jewish Agency's mission is today. Now, of course, we work in the arena of Aliyah, which was our kind of mandated role way back when, for those that choose to make Aliyah or those that are rescued from volatile situations where there are communities in crisis. We work primarily in the area of connecting global Jewish communities, as I mentioned before. We have some over 1,000 emissaries of shlichim that we send globally each year. Unfortunately, during the pandemic over the past year, that number has decreased somewhat, but we're hoping to bring those numbers back up, sending shlichim to communities based on the needs and interests of those communities, enhancing Jewish education, enhancing the Jewish connection, and Bezrat Hashem strengthening those Jewish communities going forward. Work in the arena of, as I mentioned a minute ago, crisis and community resilience. We have an incredible new initiative that the Jewish Agency recently launched called JReady, which is the kind of initiative that's partnering with this session today. The JReady initiative is there to support crisis response in global Jewish communities and build the resilience that can be in terms of public health with the crisis that we're experiencing globally right now, understanding that the coronavirus pandemic is our current crisis, but unfortunately, it's not the first that we've experienced as a Jewish people, and it's likely not to be the last. We're unfortunately experiencing a rise in anti-Semitism across communities based on the response of the pandemic. This is something that we'll be needing to address quite significantly going forward, along with issues of mental health, staffing and keeping Jewish institutions globally open. The Jewish Agency initiated a loan fund to support Jewish institutions around the world, distributing some $10 million to 56 global organizations, just so that they can remain solvent during the pandemic that's affected so many. And every day we're talking with different Jewish communities and different organizations to really understand what those needs are, connect them with the resources and the expertise around the world to really support them through whatever crisis and resilience building needs they have. So it's really wonderful to be with this illustrious group of people, and I'm very pleased to present the wonderful Prof.Menachem Ben Sasson, who is going to be our speaker for today. I'll give you just a brief introduction to who this great man is. and then I will hand over the torch and pass the floor to him. So Prof.Menachem Ben Sasson is the Chancellor of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He has served as the Hebrew University's 13th president, a position he held for 8 years. He previously served as the Hebrew University's rector and deputy dean of the Faculty of Humanities. And prior to his presidency at the Hebrew University, Professor Ben Sasson was a member of the Israeli Knesset, where he held the portfolio of chairman of the Knesset Constitution, Law and Justice Committee. Professor Ben Sasson is a scholar in the Department of the History of the Jewish People in the Faculty of Humanities, and a historian of the heritage of Jews in Muslim lands, and has written books and scholarly articles on these ranges. Professor Ben Sasson lives in Jerusalem. He is married, has 3 children and 8 grandchildren, Kananahara. So without further ado, I will hand over the floor to Professor Ben Sasson. Thank you very much.
Good evening to you, to everybody around the world. And for a second, I will try to share the screen, and then we'll be able to at least enjoy some of the pictures. So is the screen shared? Thank you. And can you still hear me, my voice? In today's meeting, I'll dedicate some 45 minutes, and I know that the topic needs a whole course of 1,000 years, but we have another 1,000 years to live it. What I want to have at the end of the meeting, the following. One, that you all know that between the 7th and the 14th century, 98% or 95 to 98% of the Jewish people lived under Islam, namely spoke one language, enjoyed almost one status, political status, and it was the only time since then that it could serve, I mean the world could serve as a melting pot for the Jewish people. That anything, and that's what we're going to discuss today, that took place during this period and afterwards actually has been influencing, is influencing, and I believe will influence future life also of Jewish people. So that's what we call formative time. It's a formative time because in this period, the 700 years that we're going to talk about today, this is a formative time because the opposite of the Tower of Babylon. If you speak one language, Arabic, if you are free to move from one place to another, or almost free to move, if you are protected by law of the government, of the Muslim government, if you enjoy a different status of what you had before in economic life, you can use it, or you can leave it aside. If you are apathic, you create nothing. If you want to create, it's a time to do. And indeed, the Jews of Islam did a lot. So the bookshelf behind me and many bookshelves behind you in all other places actually was created mostly in this time. If it was created beforehand, think of the Bible, think of the Mishnah, think of the Talmud, all of them got another dimension in the period that we talk about. It was enlightened in a different look and inherited for ages to come, thanks to the time, thanks to the conditions, thanks to the contacts between the communities of the world of Islam. Something about the information, what is the shape, how did they live? So we'll dedicate few minutes, 5 to 10, to the organizational frameworks of the Jewish world, the ecumenical organization. You know, the Jewish people before Middle Ages lived both in Eretz Israel, Babylonia. These were the centers, may we say sacred centers. And from these centers, the Torah or the Talmud was written, Talmuds, 2 of them, and traditions were transferred to other places. The concept was of one center, and anything around was influenced by these 2 centers. You cannot have it anymore. You cannot have it anymore, just even because of the sheer fact that the world is different and it's broad, vast, and all the green actually is the world of Islam. And the roads that you can see in different colors are roads of commerce that Jews actually went from one place to another in 4 different ways. The name of the merchants was the Razanites, after a neighborhood in Baghdad. And the world of Razanites is actually pictured by Muslim historiographers. But you can see stations of commerce in each of the communities that you can decipher, if you can see the slide, all around the world of that time. So when I said 98%, I really meant it. And you can see the other colors. By elimination, you understand that this is the 2%, the remains that are not speaking Arabic. Even southern Italy and Sicily are Arabic spoken countries. Yes, Turkey at that time was different, since we have at least 3 of you who live in Turkey in this presentation, but in a period after you have the legacy of Islam inherited by Turkish leaders for many years and shared with other communities. So the ecumenical organization was made of 2 centers, the traditional 2 centers, Eretz Israel and Babylonia. And the network that one has to take in mind named Reshut. Reshut in Hebrew, permission. Anything that you did in each of the communities that were in the regions of the Reshut, namely the geographical periphery of Eretz Israel and Babylonia, but the periphery was very generous, was very big, each of these places had to be subordinated to the centers. If you appointed a judge, a ritual slaughter, a teacher, a mohel, you had to take a permission from the head of your community, who took a permission from the head of the Jews. So take it to the daily life. If your son is circumcised now by the local mohel, he is actually doing it with the permission of the center. So it's a kind of a hierarchy, and you are sure that anything that you do is actually done by the sacred center, even if you live in the community of Alexandria, or even if you live in the community of Basra, of Shushan, Shustar at that time in Persia, in Aleppo, Halab at that time, or in the area of Lebanon, also was under the jurisdiction of Eretz Israel. And there was a tension between the centers. Eretz Israel claimed to be the future of the Jewish people, while Babylonia said, Iraq said, but who knows, the future will come when Mashiach will come. But nowadays, you should listen to us, the Babylonians, because we inherited the tradition of learning, the books, and the accurate halacha that Eretz Israel didn't have for a long time due to persecutions the Jews lived under Byzantine and wasn't able to operate full Jewish life. It wasn't fully true, but at least it was a good claim for the Babylonian center, at least to demand subordination of communities who were out of the Reshut area. Who are out of the Reshut area? All the communities from Barca in Libya and to the west, namely Tunisia, Algeria nowadays, Morocco, what we called at that time El Maghreb El Aqsa, Spain, and southern Italy. All of this area was out of the Reshut. They could decide for their own daily life. They could elect their own judges, their own officers. Therefore, Eretz Israel quoted them, and Babylonia quoted them in order to get more recognition and more communities who would willingly, out of free will, subordinate to one of the centers. So the diaspora was halfly dependent on the Jewish centers. I mean, all the reshut areas. In a second, we'll see a map. And others were out of the reshut, but maintained a dialogue between the communities and the centers. So still, the ecumenical organization remained until the 11th century, until Crusaders came to Jerusalem in 1099, and until Babylonia suffered series of attacks that disconnected it from the communities in the West, but until then, actually, almost daily contact was maintained by television, by Zoom, by fax of that time. So it took maybe half of a year to get a letter. But at the end, they got an answer. And we had evidence of around quarter of a million, I said 750,000 documents left from this period testifying for these contacts, enabling us to reconstruct both Jewish life in all of the communities, but at the same time, to understand the connections between center and periphery. And there were also literary results for these connections, because if you wanted, you had the pipes to broadcast to the world. The only question is if you wanted. And centers wanted to broadcast to the world, to the Jewish world. As Samantha started today, I mean, to bring the message of Jerusalem to the world, or at the time to bring the message of Iraq, or to bring the message of the communities backwards in order to be represented in sessions, ceremonies, events that were of importance to the Jewish people. It wasn't an invention of the Muslim conquest. Actually, the Jewish world of the two foci, of the two centers, is a reflection of what we had beforehand. The world was divided between Persia and Byzantine. So Eretz Israel was the center for communities that were under Byzantine rulers, while Babylonia, Iraq, was the center for communities who were under Persian rule. But the conquest changed the whole concept of daily life for Jews, as I hinted before. The Muslim conquest created a different arena, a different stage to live the life. One, according to Christianity, Jews were tolerated, if they were lucky. In some of the places, persecuted, like in Spain, Visigothic Spain, part of the time in Byzantine, persecuted, but most of the time, at least tolerated. That's the best that they could get. While under Islam, Jews were defined protected. If they paid the tax, namely the jizya, they called it, that was the poll tax, and the tax on land, as long as they had lands, which they called haraj, and both of them were called jariya. So if they paid the taxes, automatically they were protected. If you hit the Jew who paid the tax, you have problems with me, with the ruler, with the sultan, with the head of the tribe, with the head of the region. Therefore, a different legal status completely changed their life. Secondly, economic options were opened. The borders were knocked down. They were able to move from Morocco to India and backwards. From the gates of Paris, where the Arabic conquest stopped at 732, to the southern parts of Yemen, to Aden. And indeed, as you remember from the map that I started with, actually these routes reflect the use of the pipes for commercial contacts. Aha, but it's not the all. If you have got already pipes, if you are capable of moving from one place to another, you can take letters, you can take books, you can take questions, and you can bring answers. So on this, in these pipes, you actually created Again, what you heard at the beginning of my presentation by Samantha, you created what we call arvut adadit, responsibility to each other. You know what's going on. But it's not only that. You have a family. In a family, you have got 3 sons and 3 sons-in-law, and you want them to spread over the commercial stations of the world to represent the interests of the family. So in no time, you can find Wakel et Jar representatives of the merchants all over the Jewish world represented families' interest, but actually creating a network of commitment of family representatives from the center to the periphery and vice versa. So you created within 200 years very solid and strong network between East, West, South and North. And it was based on also a common language, because in order to survive in this place, you have to know the language. And the lingua franca of that time wasn't English and neither Hebrew, it was the Arabic. It came to the situations that the people of Fes in the year of 900 sent a question to the leaders of Babylonia: can we stop translating the Bible to Aramaic and can we start translating it to Arabic, because that's the language that everybody speaks? And in no time, there was the first dictionary, trilingual Hebrew, Aramaic, and Arabic, representing also the change, the massive change in the cultural life, enabled by the Arabic conquest, creating the platform for connection between communities. The connection is not only about commerce, the connection is about daily life. The connection is about spiritual life. The connection is about anything that has to do, as I said, creativity, writing, reading, learning, and then inheriting the legacy from one generation to another. Immigration started from east to west. You find families who came from Persia and lived in Morocco, who lived in Tunisia. They still kept the family contacts, but also the names of communities of origin, and also the techniques of work. You can find a Persian fabric in southern Tunisia, still having the name Tustari, comes from Shushan, Shustar, and reflects the tradition of civilization of textiles, not only of learning, not only of reading, not only of praying, again, making it one Jewish world. What are the sources of authority usually? Not only inheritance, not only religion, money, it's a power. If you are a minority and you are connected to the non-Jewish authorities, you are very powerful. And you know better than I, you who live abroad, you know the power of this connection. And also pedigree. Pedigree because you remember who was the father, who was the grandfather. So these are the sources of authorities that you can find from one place to another. And you can find it also in the ecumenical institutions and in the diaspora communities. And the levels of contacts of the communities to the centers was of 4 different levels. You remember, first is the official. You are officially subordinated to the center. You remember the term, Reshut, R-E-S-H-U-T, Reshut, permission. This is the area. Secondly, from time to time, you are not subordinated by the authority, but you need the help. You do not know the answer. You need the rabbi to answer your question, whether this one is allowed or not. Is it according to the sources or not? Is there a text that you can send me and help me in reading and understanding? So this is a functional subordination. You are not obliged. You do not have to, but you want to. The third one is the differential issue at contact. And most of the communities of the West had this differential attitude. They felt that the centers are still sacred. They know that Eretz Israel will be the arena for the future. As they know that Babylonia has got the tradition of learning the sources and the authority to run the daily life. Therefore, they do not need them anymore. We'll see in maybe 10 minutes that they do not need them anymore in the Maghreb, in North Africa. But they respect them. And they respect them by differential attitude. And don't be cynical. Differential attitude is counted. Not only money, but money reflected because you support. You support because you want to be part of, as you support when you go to the synagogue and give the donation because you want to be part of the community. Some of you support the land of Israel nowadays because you want to be part of it. Don't be cynical. You don't like this politician, you don't like this politician, but you like the organ. You like the phenomenon. At that time, you want to feel part of the sacred centers. And the certain centers in exchange gave them honorary titles that reflect the center. They gave you the title of Aluf, namely the head of a line in the center. They gave you the name Rosh Kala. We may have time later to explain it. They gave you the name Ahuv Aishiva, the one who is liked by the center. All of these names are not just titles. People carry them with pride to show that they are really part and parcel of the sacred center because they had, as I said, a differential attitude towards the center. And they, from time to time, announce their independence because they felt that they're strong enough to do it. So we spoke about the Reshut area, the Reshut network. I just want to show you, those of you who can read Arabic, it's very difficult. It was written some almost 1,000 years ago. The year is 1030. This is a draft found in the Cairo Geniza. Maybe once we'll talk about the Cairo Geniza. It is a collection of manuscript that was dispatched in a synagogue in the old Ben Ezra synagogue in Cairo. And this one is written in Arabic, so there is no holiness. But in the other side, there are Hebrew letters. And this is a draft that was written for the Caliph. We know even the name of the Caliph. Mu'tasim, he was a Fatimid, Shiite Caliph in Egypt. And this is a draft that describes the appointment of the head of the authority in Jerusalem. The institute in Jerusalem was named Yeshiva. No, don't be mistaken. It's not an academic institute. Yeshiva is the Hebrew translation for a Greek word named Sanhedrin. In the Yeshiva of Jerusalem, there were 17 members, and they were the elected Yeshiva, the elected Sanhedrin of the time. And he was named the head of the Yeshiva. That's the Arabic word, Rais al-Mathiba. And this is the draft saying that he is in charge of appointing, of firing, of collecting money, of the right behavior of the communities in the area of the Reshut, in the area of his responsibility. And his responsibility is Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, and northern parts of Yemen. So that is the Reshut, and this is a document that shows what's the meaning of it. And if you want to see what's the real meaning of Reshut, look at the colors here. The Reshut of Eretz Israel is the orange one. In this area, until Barca, you see Barca of Luz. Now I point to it, Barca in Libya. So this is the area that was in the Reshut of Eretz Israel. While the Reshut of Babylonia was this round around Baghdad, and a little bit to the east, and some northern parts of Arabia. That's it. The blue color that you see is not the official subordination of these communities. This one represents the influence that Babylonia had on these communities. We have exchange of responsa from center to the diaspora, from the diaspora to the center, not because they had to, because they wanted to. Not because they didn't want to know the answers, because they wanted to be in touch with the centers. And interesting enough, while the big monies went to Eretz Israel in order to support the center, it was always in deficit. The daily contact was with Babylonia. In a question sent in the year of 960 to the center of Eretz Israel, they asked, do you know whether the Mashiach came or not? And the answer they got from Eretz Israel was, look, we do not know, and when Mashiach comes, you know like us, and we know like you. However, we expect you to ask us questions about ritual slaughtering, about halacha, about daily life. They didn't get questions from the diaspora. Only Babylonia got questions from the diaspora. So this is the map of influence and at the same time of the permission of each of the sides. So this is the definition. And in Babylonia, let's go back for a second. In the city of Baghdad, which was the center of the caliphate, were 3 yeshivot. Yeshiva of Sura, Yeshiva of Pumbedita, and Yeshiva of Rosh Gola, of the Exilarch. Each of them is yeshiva because you know now, yeshiva is not only a learning place, yeshiva is mainly a central leading institute. It's like a Sanhedrin. So each of the yeshivot appoints the dayanim, appoints the officials as in charge of the daily life of each of the communities of the reshuyot. This is the handwriting. The year is 960 of the head of the yeshiva of Pumbedita in Baghdad. His name was Prof.Menachem Ben Sasson. He wrote a letter to the communities of Yemen, and he tells them in Hebrew, you can see the word, those of you who read Hebrew, you wrote to me that you read, Ki hem shoftim, you see? Ki hem shoftim u'shluchim, u'memunim. So these are the officers of us, and you should obey them. And that's the other side of the same letter. Coming again, it is a letter, the original was sent to Yemen, afterwards it was brought to Egypt, and that's the way we found it in the Cairo Geneva. The whole period is named after the heads of the yeshivot. Their name were Gaon. Those of you who know Hebrew know that Gaon nowadays is genius. No, that's not the case. Some of them were genius. Gaon is an official title, the head of the academy, like in the Second Temple period, the Nasi. So the Gaon was the head of the yeshiva, the head of the Sanhedrin. So there were, in any given time, until the 11th century, 4 Geonim, one in Eretz Israel, 3 Geonim, one in Eretz Israel, 2 in Babylonia, and 1 Exilarch, 1 Rosh Gola. Why Gaon? Because the verse says as the following. In Tehillim, chapter 47, verse number 5. He chooses us, God, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, our inheritance for us, the pride of Jacob, whom he loved, Selah. So here is the parallel. What's God's inheritance? Gaon, the yeshiva. Therefore, the head of the yeshiva is Gaon, is named after this verse. And the whole period between the 7th and 11th century is named the period of the Geonim. So Babylonia had ideology, this is the chosen center, and it had assignments. They sent legal decisions from time to time, they sent answers to questions, and they took care of the communities around. We don't have time, but trust me, whenever you have people, you have also tensions. So in no time, there were tensions between the exilarch and the Gaonim, and vice versa. Some of them fired some others. Some of them took the cases to the public by sending letters, and that's the way we know, because everything was broadcasted to the media, and we have got evidence going back to this period describing us, the tensions between them. For example, just to cite one of them, it was written in the year 950 for the Reshut of Khorasan. Khorasan is the eastern part of Iraq, southern parts of Persia, had in olden times belonged to Pumbedita, to this academy, to this yeshiva, whence the Dayanim judges used to be sent to them, and taxes were taken. And now the exilarch wanted to take over the area of Khorasan to be in his subordination. And then a tension started. They took it to the Sultan, to the king, and one of them was fired, was taken to exile, and then had to move to go to North Africa because he was not accepted after this debate between the two yeshivot. The Reshuyot collapsed, as I said. It started dawning, and in the 11th century, they failed to collect the taxes. There were Bedouins attacks on the cities, and the farms were not capable of sending the monies that they used to send before it. However, it's worthwhile mentioning this point. Around the year 970, there was a rehab period for the centers in Babylonia, thanks, I think, maybe an accident. The situation was not easy, and the contacts were not as the usual beforehand between them and North Africa. But in the year 987, the people of Tunisia asked a very simple question to the Gaon 987, 987, to the Gaon of Pumbedita. His name was Rav Shrira. They asked him, how was the Talmud, the Mishnah, written? How were these texts written? And how was it transferred to the two generations after? So you can say it was written by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, you can say it was written by Rabashi and Ravina, but no, Rav Shrira took the hard way. He wrote a whole book, epistle of around 100 pages. And he told them, according to the books that he had in his yeshiva of Pumbedita in Baghdad, he told them the whole story from the traditions of the times of Moshe Rabbeinu to his time, 987, how the Torah was transferred from one generation to another. And this epistle was a breakthrough. All of a sudden, people saw in one continuous writing, not by one verse in this tractate of Talmud, by one verse in another tractate of Talmud, but a systematic work, writing history, continuous history that was not written before. So this one was so nice that afterwards, Rav Shrira and his counterpart in the other yeshiva, Rav Shmuel ben Chofni Gaon, wrote to the communities, we can write to you books, monographies, books on titles, as many as you want. And they wrote books in Arabic in each of the topics, broke, I'm saying it again, broke the order of the Talmud into systematic thinking that was taken from the Greek understanding, logical organization of a topic by outline, by introduction, and by ending. There was a stream of new books. As I said, monographies, dozens. It came almost to 250 books written from the beginning of the 10th century, and the flood was till the second third of the 11th century, sent from Babylonia to the communities. Many times it was dedicated to this very important people and to this very important person and to this very important medical doctor and to this courtier who sat in the court of the caliph. And it was in purpose was first of all to get recognition. Because if you write a book and people study it, later on they ask questions and they continue the contact that was stopped due to some of the political wars that took place in the Mediterranean. So the rehabilitation of the time was built on 4 elements: responsa, questions and answers, monographies, I just described, on any topics that you want. Mathematics, philosophy, we didn't have systematic philosophy before. Now it's written in Arabic. And then bestowing honorary titles like Chaver, Rosh Seder, Rosh Kala, Aluf, Nagid, and appointment of representatives, not officials. I mean, they are not subordinated, but they want to participate. So this is the connection between centers and diaspora. So it's not only commerce. It's not only families. It's not only immigration. It's the heart of life. It's the learning. They rebuilt the spirit of the nation. They rewrote the old sources. They remade the Jewish bookshelf. And they made it in a new language, in Arabic. And they wrote it in a different order. You know, I said it in before. The order of the Talmud is associative. You say something and then it is an association to another. Very typical to oral tradition. But if people stopped learning in oral way and started learning from texts by Zoom, or maybe by courses written in internet, so you have to modify yourself. You have to adapt yourself. And this adaptation was not made in Eretz Israel, but was made by the Babylonian center. They actually borrowed the tools from the Muslims and filled them with different wine. Wine, you may say kosher wine. And this wine was the new discourse that created what I said before, a different language between the Jewish people, not the Arabic language. You forgot. We started the period with 2 centers and 2 Talmuds. One is Eretz Israeli Talmud, and the other one is Babylonian Talmud. At the 11th century, there is 1 Talmud, the Babylonian. It overshadowed everything. Not only the Talmud, only the Halacha, the philosophy, the analysis of the Hebrew language, the traditions of Midrash. Anything that you can dream of was rewritten and re-put in different shapes, in different language, enabling the people of the Jewish communities to feel up to date to their time, to feel that they can write even poetry in Arabic metric. In Arabic metric, דור יקרא לבן עם בת, ואם צורכם כמו בבת, ואם שמכם ולא יושבת, שבו ונוחו ביום שבת. You know who wrote it, Dunash, Dalet Vav Nun Shni. In each of the syllabi, you can find his name. It's a Berberian name. He was born in Morocco, educated in Babylonia, and then came to Spain to serve in the court of Hizda ibn Shapur. So there is no official subordination of the communities. There is a will to share with the legacy, and the legacy was rewritten in a way that people will be capable of reading it, not only in the current language of the time, but also in the current shape of the time, in the current platform of the time. And that is was the case, for example, in Sicily. I took Sicily as an example because not many of you know that Sicily was Muslim. Actually, until the Spanish expulsion, in many of the communities, they still spoke Arabic. So in this place, Sicily, for example, still kept the contacts with Eretz Israel, but they wrote what they wrote. So there is a letter in the mid-11th century from Sicily. It's written from the two leaders of the community, Matzliach ben Enya and his pupil, and it's sent to Rav Hananel in Kairouan, who was the first commentator of the Talmud. And he complains on procedures that they took just in order to solve problems in the local place. For what is the procedure? They stopped the prayer in the synagogue if they didn't get the justice that they claim that they should get. So it's almost democracy. I can't say that it's democracy, but if they transpass you and they forgot about your case, and your file is forgotten from one day to another, and you know whose files are forgotten? Women. And if she's a widow, it's forgotten more than the others. And if she's a widow and her husband was a poor man, she will be forgotten by the brother-in-law, and the money that she should get didn't come on time, and she's starving. So she can starve for 1 week, but not more than that. How many weeks can she wait? So there was a procedure. She would stop the prayer and shout to the people of Israel. That's the name of it. I want to shout. I want to say, please take my case. At least next Monday, I was waiting too much, and it helped. We have dozens of cases of such a procedure. And another modern shape, and I think that with that I have to finish, there were lobbies of interessants. The North Africans were the richest element in the Mediterranean. Why? Because they were in the borders of the Sahara, and the Sahara was a land of gold. Why? Because all routes went to the west, and because it was a new land. They got special reductions for taxes. People came and were very successful. Later on, they moved to live in Cairo. So they created a lobby of North African Jews in Egypt, and they influenced life in Egypt, but also life in Eretz Israel. And in no time, and you remember 970, there is the remaking of the contact between Babylonia and North Africa and Spain. But at that time also, it's the first time that in Eretz Israel, we had a Gaon, you remember, the head of the Sanhedrin, who came from southern Morocco. One of them came from Sijil Mesa. Sijil Mesa is in the last point before the Sahara. And after him came another one who came from the city of Fes in Morocco. So these were the Gaons of Eretz Israel from 970, and it will follow until the times of Maimonides. When he will come, the North African traditions will be there already. He came in 1170s. I cannot go to all of the details, so I jump just to show you the local communities, and with that I will finish. Not with the story of the four captives. You can read it. I want to finish with Rambam, with Maimonides. When he arrived to Egypt in the summer of 1169, after Shavuot, first he visited Akko, Jerusalem, and Hebron. He came to Egypt. In no time, a few months after he came, he was not only the major mind of the Mediterranean, a youngster who already wrote the whole commentary of the Mishnah a year ago. I mean, it was sealed in 1168 when he was 30 years old. So he was known, but he was heavily involved in community issues. And good many of Jews were taken as captives from the city of Bilbais in northern Egypt and taken to Akko in Eretz Israel. So he made a campaign in the year of 1169, and this campaign was aiming into the redeeming of the captives. But it's not only a campaign. He made his business that you pay and he pays, and if the other one doesn't have money, he will sell his servant, maid servant at home, and he'll get 30 dinars, and out of it he'll get some money, and out of it he made some good sum of money, and he sent the two Dayanim of the city of Cairo to Akko to redeem the captives. So it's not a central organization. It's not the sacred old centers in Babylonia and Eretz Israel. It is the reflection of what is very crucial for the future. It's the reflection of the local community to maintain the life of its own as a community, but also of its individuals. And if one sheep is taken for captivity, then the shepherd is in charge of making the fundraising in order to make sure that this sheep is redeemed. So this is the original text written by Maimonides' scribe. We know his name, Mevorach ben Natan. We know his father, we know his grandfather, very distinguished family of Eretz Israeli origin. However, he was the scribe for Maimonides. He wrote the text, and Maimonides signed it. See, Moshe Bar Maimon Zatzal. His father wasn't alive anymore. So that's the circular letter that is sent to the communities. You should pay for the captives. But he was involved in other things. For example, and this is a letter, you know Arabic, so you can read it. Amadi Wasidi, Sheikh Athika, who was the father-in-law of his son, and he sends him a person by his name Yitzchak El Der'i. You see the name Yitzchak Der'i, and he says, because I know him, because he's part of our friends, and please help us with his taxes. And again, you see, Moshe Berabi Maimon Zatzal. This one is written by him. So Maimonides wrote philosophical books. We can talk about it. He wrote halachic books. We can talk about it. He was very authoritative when it came to other things, but he was also a very responsible leader, enabling individuals in his communities to live. I'll finish with an episode. You know, checks is not very easy halachically. According to the Talmud in the Tractate of Baba Kama, page number 104, you cannot send ma'ot b'dyukni. You cannot send money in transfer by paper. But it won't work in international commercial activities. So what you see here is series of checks written by one person. His name was, you can see Abu Zikri. You can see Abu Zikri HaKohen, Abu Zikri HaKohen, Abu Zikri HaKohen. These are the checks. So he would give it to the builder. He would give it, it's small money. He would give it to a wheat supplier, but he would give these checks, small pieces of paper. You can see the centimeters, number of centimeters, 3 centimeters each. And he would send it to the one who was the banker. And the banker will give the money at the end of the month. They'll calculate, and Abu Zikri will give him the money of the community. We know Abu Zikri, he was a little bit earlier than Maimonides, the head of the community. So that's the life of the communities. And what we went through today were the following. One, the whole Jewish world became one. It is a formative period because of 5 different reasons: language, legal status, commercial activities, international immigration of the Jewish people, and creating of new contents between the Jewish communities from the centers and other places. And I didn't say anything about creativity in the communities. At that time, 11th century communities started. to writing their own writings. Who wrote the first commentary on the Talmud? His name was Rav Hananel ben Chushiel, who lived in Tunisia. Who wrote the second one? Not Rashi. Rabbi Nissim ben Yaakov ibn Shaheen, who lived in Tunisia. Who wrote the first three-lingual dictionary? I told you already, but I didn't mention the name. Now I mentioned the name. Yehuda ibn Quraish. Who discovered the three consonant roots of the Hebrew language? Yonah ibn Janah, who lived in Fes and then moved to Spain. Who was the first doctor who wrote systematic medical books? His name was Yitzhak ben Shlomo el-Israeli, who lived in Tunisia. His book was translated later on to Latin and was taught in Christian universities until the 15th century. Who wrote the first mathematical book? His name was Dunash ibn Tamim. He lived also in Tunisia. Who wrote the first astronomical book? Also, Dunash ben Tamim lived in Tunisia. And so on and so forth. I could go to each department of creativity, either in Babylonia, or in North Africa, or in Spain. Do not have any doubt. Communities under Christian rules continued writing, but they wrote in the associative manner, while the communities under Islam broke the whole system of thinking, went to the logical system. Even if you wrote mysticism, the son of Maimonides was a mysticist. His books also are written in Judeo-Arabic, but he wrote it in a systematic manner as his father wrote his philosophical books. The book of the son of Rambam, Rabbi Abraham, was Kifayat el-Ebedin, the book, the sufficient book for worship of God. So it's the whole different arena platform that was created. The world of Jewish Islam actually took us to what we are nowadays, to be one people who follow one law, who is capable of sharing with the same legacy, and also, as I dared say in the first sentence, inheriting it to generations to come. Thank you very much for your patience, and sorry if I took too much of your time. Next time I'll be in the right framework. Thank you.
Professor, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. It was really, really fascinating to hear you speak. And from my perspective, you could have gone on much longer. I was completely hooked. Thank you so much. I'm pleased to invite Rav Mendy now to say a few words. All of our audience probably knows him already, but he would like to share a few words with you now, and then we will have time for questions, about 10 minutes for questions afterwards. Please feel free to write your questions in the chat, and we will share them with the professor as we go along. Rabbi Mendy.
Thank you very much, Professor Ben Sasson. It was really fascinating. As chairman of the Alliance of Rabbies in Islamic States, I found the part of the Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, the Rambam, helping a rabbi in Morocco very, very fitting, because the idea of rabbis extending hands to each other across the Islamic sphere is something that has not only been invented with the coming of the Alliance of Rabbies just 2 years ago, but I see it has happened 850 years ago by the time of Maimonides. Of course, it wasn't through Zoom at the time, it was through written communication and the request of real money, not just checks or PayPal transfers. Nevertheless, life is replicates itself in maybe in a more modern way, but befits also to that antiquity. And it just shows how Jews have always been part of this, of the Islamic sphere, of the Islamic region. And it is something that sometimes we have to remind those in the West, and as well as our neighbors in the Islamic world, that Jews have been and will always be part of this region. So I want to thank you very much for this very, very enlightening lecture. And I'm sure in the future we'll be able to host you to speak about maybe more individual communities as well, and their interaction with their Muslim neighbors and Muslim scholarship as well. Thank you very, very much, Professor.
I just wanted to apologize. There were another 25 slides on Chizda ibn Shaput, and some other 50s on Maimonides, and others on Saadia Gaon, but we have to leave something for the future.
Of course, we leave the past for the future. So
yes.
I want to thank you very much for that. And as I told the professor before, when we just started, he asked how long should he speak. I said, I'm sure the professor could speak for weeks on end, but we have 1 hour for today, and in the future we'll have some more. Thank you very much. And I want to thank again the Jewish Agency for JReady for taking on the initiative of working together with us and bringing interesting speakers to the Islamic world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I see there are no questions. I think everyone is still trying to process the new information that they've received from you today, Professor Ben Sasson. So thank you once again, and thank you, Rav Mendy, and to all of our participants and all of our partners. And we're really looking forward to this wonderful future relationship and partnership with the Alliance of Rabbies. So thank you very much. And
I wish you good luck with your great activities. I really envy you that you're in the front line, and I promised any help that could be given will be given by my colleagues or by myself. We admire the work that you do.
Thank you very much.
Kol tov. Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Bye-bye.